everybody? It's your boy Gsluke, golf ambassador for Prize Picks, bringing you guys my top targets here for round one of this week's Mexico Open. It's a brand new event, a new golf course for us to break down, which means a little bit of unknown on the Prize Picks board, which might seem like a little bit of a disadvantage, but also could be opening up a lot of opportunity. So for those of us that do the proper research, look into this golf course to try and get an idea of how it plays, could be a really nice slate to target. So in this video, going to be going over my card here for the first round, my top 3 props this time around that I have my eye around, and I'll be building a majority of my slips around for round one. So one thing to mention with last week, a quick review before we hop into this specific preview, is last week, yet again, another profitable week. That makes it 4 weeks in a row where over our 4 cards, we've ended up profitable. Last week, ended up having a 5x that hit, of course, a 2x that almost ended up being a 12.5x that hit one of the days, and of course the two 12.5x's that hit the week before that. So we're on a little bit of a heater, looking to ride that again into this week and to try and get some profit for you guys. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right on into it here with our preview here for Thursday. Alright guys, on the screen you can see a little bit of a breakdown of this golf course. It is Vedanta Vallarta. We just want to give you an idea of how it'll play. Now on here it says it's a par 73. In reality, it'll be playing as a par 71 this week, which might lead you to think that the scores might be a little bit higher, but we're still going to have 4 par 5s. You can see there's 6 typically with this par 73 setup, so still 4 opportunities to score. And of course, if you take a look at hole number 7, it is a drivable par 4 for the entire field. In fact, it's actually going to play closer to 285 yards this week per the PGA Tour scorecard that we were given. So it is playing 74, almost 7,500 yards. So actually a little bit longer than the scorecard yardage here. A lot of that added distance was to prepare players for this specific iteration of the event, which is going to lead us to look into some of the better off the tee players, some of the better drivers of the golf ball, but also some of the better long iron players. A lot of the par 3s, they're about 170, 180 yards on average. There is one of them that's over 200 yards, 225 yards there. And on top of the par 5s, that drivable par 4, those are going to be the scoreable holes. So in general, I definitely have an emphasis again on the longer players on tour, but also just the better ball strikers in general. A quick look at the weather just to make sure there's nothing funky there for Thursday. You can see relatively benign conditions. There's going to be 3 to right around 8 miles an hour of sustained winds for much of the day. And in terms of wind gusts, nothing upwards of 8 miles an hour as well. That is going to mean that these players are playing in almost ideal conditions because this is a course about a mile inland there in Nuevo Vallarta, which means that these winds may actually be a little bit high. The wind station that this is pulling from is on the coastline, so going to be essentially playing in a dome. So with that being said, what are the props that I'm looking at? And for me, because this is an unknown golf course, we have no idea how some of those harder holes are going to play that are 480, 500 yards with some of these par 4s. I'd rather target birdies or better, right? It's a little bit safer if we have a few blow-up holes. Let's say those 500-yard par 4s play a little bit more difficult than I'm expecting them to. Birdies or better is a little bit safer, right? You can have that blow-up hole still end up hitting 5 or 6 birdies on the day. And specifically with these 3 players, all 3 of them, all long off the tee, all really solid on approach, and just the highest quality players in the field, right? If we're looking at it DFS, these are the quote-unquote stud tier range of guys priced $9,900 and above. Let's go ahead and break them down one by one, which first off, we have Jon Rahm, top 5 player in the world. Of course, world number 1 until Scottie Scheffler took that right away from him, but a very solid ball striker, the best off the tee player in the world. It's not even close. Over his last 24 measured rounds is gaining over 1.2 strokes per round with his off the tee play. The next best player in the world is close to 0.7 shots gained per round, which is just an outrageous differential between what he's been doing and of course the next best player in the world, which is still an elite level driver. Another thing I like is the approach play. Of course, Jon Rahm, one of the best iron players that we've ever seen on tour. And even though of late, he hasn't quite been his sharpest self, just gaining around a quarter of a stroke per round. If you give him a larger term sample size, right, zoom out a little bit, take a look at the last 2 to 3 months rather than just the last month, he returns to right around a stroke gained per round. So, of course, if we're looking at a long golf course, a golf course where a lot of your birdies are going to come on those par 5s, those long par 3s, the drivable par 4, like I mentioned before, he's going to be a prime candidate to maybe even put up a few eagles. So I know the putter hasn't been ideal for Jon Rahm. That is, of course, the real worry here. But this is a player who's going to be capable of reaching a lot of those par 5s and 2. We already talked about the drivable par 4. And if he can make one, maybe even just 2 birdies on the par 3s and par 4s that are out there, it's going to easily eclipse the 5 birdie mark. So somebody I have projected, again, we don't have all that much data, so it's kind of hard to do these projections. But in terms of the numbers that we do have, I have projected for 5.6 birdies. So that's a significant amount higher than the 4.5 projection that we have, but most importantly, higher than the 5 mark that we need him to get to go out there and hit the over. Next up, we have Tony Fenol, very similar to Jon Rahm, a ball striking specialty, somebody who's going to gain a ton of strokes off the tee with his distance, but also, of course, with the approach play. The one concern with Fenol as opposed to Jon Rahm is the accuracy off the tee. And something I should have mentioned before is that the fairways here are extremely wide, 40 to 50 yards wide for most of these fairways, which means the guys that aren't necessarily accurate are going to get away with it here. 40 to 50 yards is very similar to what we have at Kapalua, where about the field is hitting 80, maybe even 85% of their fairways. That means that the guys that gain a ton of strokes off the tee with their accuracy are not going to be doing that this week. It's all about getting it out there with your distance, which means guys like Tony Fenol, who when they really go out there and put a lot of power into their swings, can hit at 330, maybe even 340 yards. So I would expect that to be a huge advantage here. Very similar with the approach play, of course, over his last 24 measured rounds is gaining about a third of his stroke per round. Also, a little bit shaky with the putter, but most importantly, on those par 5s, that drivable par 4, all of these relatively gettable holes, he's going to have a birdie look, right? So just needs to cash in at least 5 times on the slate. Not nearly as strong as a projection as somebody like Jon Rahm. I only have him projected right around 5.2, 5.3 birdies, right in that range right there for round 1, but still well over the 5 mark that we need in somebody that I'll be adding to my card. And lastly, we have Gary Woodland, who, again, just very similar players that I'm going with here, and that shouldn't be a surprise given the course fit. A long player off the tee also tends to be very inaccurate, much like a Tony Fenol, but over his last 24 measured rounds is gaining 0.8 of a stroke per round with his approach play, and that's per round. That is almost half a stroke more per round than Jon Rahm. So, of course, Gary Woodland, we know he's an absolute bomber. The guy is one of the strongest players on tour. That's readily apparent just by looking at his physique. I mean, the guy is just an absolute bull out there. But the approach play has been unbelievable as well. That is actually number 1 for this field over the last 24 measured rounds. And the putter has been there as well. He's gaining about a quarter of a stroke per round. So really, he's the best putter out of these 3. Maybe a little bit more inconsistent off the tee than a Tony Fenol and Jon Rahm. But given the size of the fairways, about 40 to 50 yards wide, he's going to get away with that. So the one concern that I would have for Gary Woodland, we can kind of put to the side there, and definitely somebody I'm looking to add to my cards this week because I see him getting right around 5.4 birdies. This is what I have him projected for. So a little bit higher than Tony Fenol, a little bit less than Jon Rahm, of course. Difference in pedigree is going to do that, but certainly all plays that I like getting to. For my card, I have them in a power play, so I already have it entered. It's a 5-leg power play for 5x for $50. I'm not going to enter another one here for you guys because I already have it in, but it's $250. I think it's a fair play. I'm expecting for Friday through Sunday to have a little bit more options. As we get more and more information on the course, the Prize Picks guys should feel more comfortable putting out more lines for us. If we end up having Shot Link, which I'm not sure whether we're going to have it or not for this event because it is in Mexico, could see some fairways GIR, maybe even some holes props to go with. So certainly a lot to look out for there, but this is what I'm going with in round 1. If you wanted to add anything, make it a 5-leg card. You could add a few strokes, or you can go over on somebody like Patrick Reed if you need to find a fade. And I wouldn't mind taking the under on Abraham Answer. So again, if you wanted to make this a 12.5x parlay, you could take Abraham Answer, take the under, go over here to strokes, take Patrick Reed, take the over. Of course, it's a lot more risky, right? It gets you to that 12.5x mark. Not something that I'll personally be doing here for round 1, again, because of some of the unknowns. But that's what I would do if I was going that way. That's all I've got here for the round 1 Prize Picks targets. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and let me know down in the comments what your favorite prop on the board is, whether it was something that I mentioned or completely off my radar. I'd love to hear from you guys, so make sure you go ahead and comment that down below. And as per usual, going to have you guys covered for rounds 2 through 4 as well. So if you're not already subscribed to the channel, highly recommend you go ahead and do so you don't miss any of those videos when they drop. Of course, best of luck with all of your lineups this week. Best of luck with all of your slips here for Thursday. If you haven't already liked the video, make sure you smash that like button. It goes a long way with helping me grow the channel. Really appreciate it, of course. See you guys next time, and let's get this cash.